The grand ballroom of Thornwick Palace sparkled under 1,000 crystal chandeliers as nobles from across the kingdom gathered for the most anticipated event of the year. Princess Isabella stood at the top of the marble staircase, her emerald gown flowing like water as she surveyed the crowd below. Tonight was different from any other royal gathering. Tonight, she would be officially announced as the heir to the throne of Valdoria. Lady Margaret Ashworth, the Queen's sister-in-law, watched from across the room with narrowed eyes. For 30 years, she had believed her own son, Prince Edmund, would inherit the crown. The recent change in succession laws allowing female heirs had shattered her dreams and filled her heart with bitter resentment. She clutched her pearl necklace tightly, her knuckles white with tension. The herald's trumpet sounded 3 times, echoing through the vast chamber. King Frederick stepped forward, his golden crown catching the light as he raised his hand for silence. The hundreds of guests immediately fell quiet, their conversations dying to whispers and then to complete stillness. "My beloved subjects," the king's voice boomed across the ballroom. "Tonight we witness history. By royal decree and the new laws of our land, I present to you the future Queen of Valdoria, Princess Isabella Charlotte Theodora." Applause erupted throughout the hall as Isabella gracefully descended the stairs. Her auburn hair was adorned with diamonds, and she moved with the confidence of someone born to rule. Every eye followed her progress toward the throne where her father waited with the ceremonial crown of succession. Lady Margaret felt her chest tighten with rage. This moment should have belonged to Edmund. She had spent decades preparing him, grooming him for leadership, only to watch everything slip away because of some modern notion about equal rights. The very idea made her stomach turn. As Isabella approached the throne, protocol demanded that all nobles bow in recognition of the future sovereign. One by one, the assembled lords and ladies bent their knees in respect. The Duke of Westmarch, the Earl of Blackwater, the Countess of Silverdale, all acknowledged Isabella's new status, but Lady Margaret remained standing, her chin raised defiantly. The Queen Mother, Lady Catherine, noticed immediately and shot her sister-in-law a warning look. Still, Margaret refused to bend. Around her, people began to notice the breach of protocol. Whispers started to spread through the crowd like wildfire. Princess Isabella reached the throne and turned to face the assembly. Her eyes quickly found Lady Margaret standing rigid among the sea of bowed heads. For a moment, their gazes locked across the crowded room. Isabella's expression remained serene, but inside, her heart raced with a mixture of hurt and determination. King Frederick followed his daughter's gaze and spotted the defiant figure. His jaw tightened with anger. Such disrespect had not been seen in the royal court for generations. The insult was not just to Isabella, but to the crown itself and everything it represented. "Lady Margaret," Queen Catherine called out firmly, her voice carrying clearly through the silent hall. "You will show proper respect to your future queen." Margaret's response was to straighten her spine even more. "I bow only to rightful rulers," she declared, loudly enough for many to hear. "Not to those who steal crowns through political manipulation." Gasps echoed throughout the ballroom. Several ladies covered their mouths in shock, while gentlemen shook their heads in disbelief. The Duke of Northland, Margaret's own brother, looked mortified at his sister's behavior. Captain James Blackwood, head of the Royal Guard, stepped forward immediately. His hand moved instinctively to the ceremonial sword at his side as he assessed the situation. 30 years of service had taught him to recognize threats to royal dignity, and this public defiance constituted exactly that kind of threat. Princess Isabella raised her hand slightly, a gesture meant to calm the growing tension. "Lady Margaret," she said with remarkable composure, "I understand change can be difficult to accept. Perhaps you need time to reflect on what loyalty to the crown truly means." But Margaret was beyond reason. Years of suppressed anger and disappointment came pouring out in that moment. Loyalty? One something. Loyalty? She laughed bitterly. "I have served this family for 3 decades, while you played with dolls and attended tea parties. My son has proven himself in battle and diplomacy. What have you done except exist?" The insult hit its mark, but Isabella refused to show any reaction. She had trained for years, to handle exactly these kinds of challenges to her authority. Royal composure was as much a part of her armor as any sword or shield. King Frederick had heard enough. His face darkened with royal fury as he gestured sharply to Captain Blackwood. "Remove her," he commanded coldly. "This display of insubordination ends now." Captain Blackwood moved swiftly toward Lady Margaret, his metals catching the light as he strode purposefully through the crowd. Behind him, 2 junior guards followed, their faces stern and professional. They had witnessed many court dramas over the years, but none quite so public or shocking as this confrontation. "My lady," Captain Blackwood said firmly but politely, "by order of His Majesty, you will accompany us from the hall immediately." Margaret looked around desperately, hoping to find support among the other nobles. But every face that met her gaze showed either disapproval or careful neutrality. Even her own son, Prince Edmund, looked away in embarrassment, unwilling to associate himself with such a public scandal. "You cannot do this," Margaret protested, but her voice had lost much of its earlier strength. The reality of her situation was beginning to sink in. "I am family. I am blood." "Blood does not excuse treason," Queen Catherine replied icily. "And public disrespect of the heir apparent borders on exactly that." Captain Blackwood reached Margaret's side and extended his arm formally. "Please come with me willingly, my lady. Do not make this more difficult than necessary." For a moment, it seemed Margaret might comply. Her shoulders sagged slightly as the weight of consequences began to settle upon her. But then her eyes found Princess Isabella again, and all her resentment flared back to life. "This is not over," she declared, her voice carrying clearly through the stunned silence. "Mark my words, girl. Crowns can be lost as easily as they are gained." The threat hung in the air like a dark cloud over what should have been a celebration. Captain Blackwood's expression hardened at the barely concealed menace in Margaret's words. Without further ceremony, he grasped her arm firmly and began to escort her toward the nearest exit. Margaret had no choice but to walk with him, her head held high in defiance, even as she was led away in disgrace. The crowd parted before them, creating a clear path to the doors. Some nobles watched with fascination while others looked away in embarrassment for the royal family. As they reached the ballroom entrance, Margaret turned back one final time. "Remember this night," she called out to the assembly. "Remember who truly deserves to rule Valdoria." Then the great doors closed behind her with a sound that echoed like thunder through the suddenly quiet chamber. For several long moments, no one moved or spoke. The unprecedented drama had left everyone uncertain about how to proceed. Princess Isabella stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. "Let us continue with the ceremony," she announced. "The future of Valdoria will not be deterred by the bitterness of the past." Slowly, the celebration resumed, but the shadow of Lady Margaret's threats lingered over the evening like a storm cloud on the horizon. In the corridors beyond the ballroom, Captain Blackwood continued his duty, unaware that this was only the beginning of a much larger conflict that would shake the very foundations of the kingdom. 3 days had passed since the dramatic confrontation at Thornwick Palace, but the whispers and speculation showed no signs of fading. Lady Margaret Ashworth sat in her private chambers at Ashworth Manor, staring out at the gray morning sky while her mind worked furiously to devise her next move. The humiliation of being dragged from the royal presence still burned in her chest like acid. Her son, Prince Edmund, paced nervously before the fireplace, his boots clicking against the marble floor with each agitated step. The young man bore the strong features of his royal bloodline, but his face was pale with worry. "Mother, perhaps we should apologize," he suggested quietly. "Father believes your outburst has damaged our family's standing beyond repair." Margaret turned from the window with fire in her eyes. "Apologize?" she repeated incredulously. "For speaking the truth? For defending what is rightfully yours?" She stood and moved toward her son, her silk gown rustling with each step. "Edmund, you were raised to be a king. Every lesson, every tutor, every moment of preparation was designed to make you worthy of that crown." But Edmund looked uncertain, torn between loyalty to his mother and the growing realization that her ambitions might destroy them all. He had watched Princess Isabella during royal functions over the years, and could not deny her intelligence and natural leadership abilities. The idea of challenging her claim felt increasingly wrong to him. Isabella has proven herself capable, he said carefully. The people respect her. Perhaps the succession laws changed for good reason. His mother's face darkened dangerously. The people know nothing, she snapped. They see a pretty princess in beautiful gowns and think that qualifies her to rule a kingdom. But ruling requires strength. Edmund, it requires the willingness to make hard choices that women simply cannot make. Meanwhile, at Thornwick Palace, Princess Isabella sat in the royal library, reviewing reports from across the kingdom. The leather-bound volumes around her contained centuries of Valdorian history, and she found comfort in reading about previous challenges faced by her ancestors. Her lady-in-waiting, Sarah, entered quietly with a tea service. "Your Highness," Sarah said softly, "Captain Blackwood requests an audience. He says it concerns security matters." Isabella looked up from her reading. "Send him in, please." Captain Blackwood entered the library with his usual military bearing. But Isabella noticed the concern etched in his weathered features. He had served the royal family faithfully for 3 decades, and she had never seen him look quite so troubled. "Your Highness," he began formally, "I must inform you of some disturbing intelligence we have gathered. Lady Margaret has been meeting secretly with certain members of the nobility. Our sources suggest she is attempting to build support for challenging your succession." Isabella set down her quill carefully, her mind immediately shifting into the strategic thinking mode her tutors had drilled into her since childhood. "Which nobles?" she asked directly. "Lord Pemberton, the Earl of Darkwater, and surprisingly, the Duke of Ravenshollow," Captain Blackwood replied grimly. "Each has significant military resources and political influence. If they unite behind Lady Margaret's cause, it could present a serious threat to stability." The princess absorbed this information thoughtfully. She had anticipated some resistance to her succession, but the idea of organized opposition felt more serious than expected. "What does Lady Margaret hope to accomplish?" "The succession laws have been formally changed and approved by Parliament. Intelligence suggests she believes the laws can be challenged in the High Court," Captain Blackwood explained. Her argument centers on the claim that Prince Edmund's superior military experience and traditional male inheritance rights supersede the new legislation. Isabella stood and walked to the great window overlooking the palace gardens. Below, gardeners tended to the winter roses while servants hurried about their daily duties. All of these people depended on the stability of the crown for their livelihoods and security. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on her shoulders. "Have you informed my father of these developments?" she asked. "His Majesty is currently meeting with his advisors to discuss the situation," Captain Blackwood confirmed. "However, he wanted you to be informed immediately. He believes you have the right to know about threats to your position." Before Isabella could respond, the library doors burst open without ceremony. Lady Margaret strode into the room with Prince Edmund trailing reluctantly behind her. 2 palace guards moved to intercept them, but Margaret waved them off imperiously. "I demand to speak with the princess," she announced loudly, her voice echoing off the library's high ceilings. Captain Blackwood immediately stepped between Margaret and Isabella, his hand moving to his sword hilt. "Lady Margaret, you were banned from court. Your presence here is unauthorized." Margaret laughed bitterly. "Banned from court? I helped build this court. I have more right to be here than some pretender playing at being queen." Isabella moved forward calmly, her training in diplomatic protocol serving her well. Despite her anger at the intrusion, she maintained perfect composure. "Lady Margaret, you are welcome to request a formal audience through proper channels. This unauthorized entry violates palace security." "Proper channels?" Margaret's voice rose with indignation. "I tried proper channels for 30 years, while watching this family make mistake after mistake. Now I come to offer you one final opportunity to step aside gracefully before this situation becomes truly unpleasant." The threat was barely veiled, and Captain Blackwood's grip tightened on his weapon. Around the library, servants and guards tensed, sensing the dangerous undercurrents flowing between the 2 women. Prince Edmund finally spoke up, his voice strained with embarrassment. "Mother, please. This is not the way." But Margaret was beyond listening to reason. Years of frustration and ambition had crystallized into this moment of confrontation. "Isabella," she said, using the princess's name without proper title, "you are young and inexperienced. You have never led men into battle or negotiated treaties with hostile nations. How can you possibly hope to protect Valdoria when real threats emerge?" Isabella's response was measured and confident. "Leadership is not just about wielding a sword, Lady Margaret. It is about inspiring loyalty, making wise decisions, and putting the kingdom's needs above personal ambition." Her words carried a subtle but unmistakable criticism of Margaret's own motivations. The insult hit home, and Margaret's face flushed red with anger. "Personal ambition?" she repeated dangerously. "Everything I have done has been for the good of Valdoria. Unlike some people, I understand that weakness in leadership leads to conquest by enemies." Captain Blackwood had heard enough. The conversation was escalating toward open confrontation, and his duty was to protect the princess from any potential threat. "Lady Margaret, you will leave immediately, or you will be removed by force." Margaret turned her blazing eyes on the captain. "You forget yourself, Captain. I outrank you in every way that matters." "You outrank no one in this palace," came a new voice from the doorway. King Frederick entered the library flanked by 4 additional guards, his face dark with royal displeasure. "Your behavior has been reported to me in full detail." The king's presence immediately changed the atmosphere in the room. Even Margaret seemed to shrink slightly before his obvious anger. Prince Edmund bowed deeply, clearly wishing he could disappear entirely. "Your Majesty," Margaret began, but Frederick cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Silence," he commanded. "You have violated palace security, threatened my daughter, and attempted to undermine the lawful succession. These actions border on treason." Margaret's face went pale at the word treason. In Valdoria, such charges carried severe penalties including loss of titles, property, and in extreme cases, exile, or worse. "I came here to speak truth," she said, her voice now noticeably less confident. "Edmund has proven himself worthy of leadership through military service and diplomatic missions. The kingdom would be stronger under his rule." King Frederick's expression grew even more stern. "The kingdom will be strongest under the ruler chosen by law and merit, not by the schemes of ambitious relatives." He gestured to Captain Blackwood. "Remove both of them from palace grounds immediately. Lady Margaret is hereby banned from court indefinitely. Prince Edmund may return only when he demonstrates proper respect for royal authority." Edmund looked stricken by this pronouncement, but he made no protest. Margaret, however, was not finished fighting. "You make a terrible mistake, Frederick," she said as the guards moved to escort her away. "The nobles remember the old ways. They remember when strength meant something more than pretty speeches and ceremonial crowns." As she was led toward the door, Margaret turned back once more to face Princess Isabella. "This is far from over, girl. You may wear the crown, but crowns can be taken by those with the will to seize them." The threat hung in the air like a poison cloud, as Lady Margaret was escorted from the palace for the second time in 3 days. But unlike the previous incident at the ball, this confrontation had revealed the true depth of her determination to challenge Isabella's succession. King Frederick waited until the library doors closed before turning to his daughter. "Isabella, I want additional security assigned to you immediately. Lady Margaret's behavior suggests she may attempt more than political maneuvering." Princess Isabella nodded thoughtfully, but her mind was already working on broader solutions. The kingdom could not afford a prolonged succession crisis, and she was beginning to understand that defeating Lady Margaret would require more than royal authority alone. The ancient Hall of Justice in Valdoria's capital had not seen such drama in over a century. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows depicting the kingdom's greatest rulers as Lady Margaret Ashworth stood before the High Court, flanked by the most expensive lawyers money could buy. Her challenge to Princess Isabella's succession had finally reached its legal climax after weeks of mounting tension throughout the kingdom. Princess Isabella sat in the gallery designated for royalty, her posture perfectly straight despite the enormous pressure she felt. Beside her, King Frederick maintained his stern expression, while Queen Catherine whispered occasionally to the royal legal advisors. The future of their dynasty hung in the balance of this unprecedented court proceeding. Chief Justice Lord Hartwell, a man whose white beard and penetrating blue eyes commanded respect from all who appeared before him, called the court to order. "We are gathered today to hear the case of Ashworth versus the Crown, challenging the lawful succession of Princess Isabella Charlotte Theodora to the throne of Valdoria." Margaret's lead attorney, Lord Blackthorne, stood to present the opening argument. He was known throughout the kingdom as a brilliant legal mind who had never lost a major case. "Your Honor, we contend that the recent changes to succession law were implemented without proper consideration of constitutional precedent and national security requirements. The argument was carefully crafted and legally sophisticated." Blackthorne argued that allowing female succession violated centuries of established tradition, and that Prince Edmund's extensive military experience made him better qualified to defend the kingdom against external threats. He presented testimonies from several military commanders who supported Edmund's claim, but when Princess Isabella's attorney, the renowned Lady Pemberton, rose to respond, her counter-argument was equally compelling. She methodically dismantled each of Margaret's claims, citing legal precedents from other European kingdoms and demonstrating how Isabella's education and diplomatic successes had prepared her for leadership in modern times. "The question before this court," Lady Pemberton declared with conviction, "is not whether we should cling to outdated traditions, but whether we should embrace the future of Valdoria under qualified leadership, regardless of gender." As the legal arguments unfolded over several hours, a crowd gathered outside the courthouse. Citizens from across the kingdom had traveled to witness this historic moment. Some carried banners supporting Princess Isabella, while others demonstrated for Prince Edmund. The divisions that had been brewing beneath the surface of Valdorian society were now fully visible. Captain Blackwood moved through the crowd with practiced ease, his trained eye assessing potential security threats. His network of informants had reported whispers of possible violence depending on the court's decision. Several groups of Edmund's military supporters had been seen gathering in taverns throughout the city, their conversations growing increasingly heated as alcohol flowed. Inside the courthouse, Margaret watched the proceedings with growing anxiety. Despite her public confidence, she could see that the legal tide was not flowing in her favor. The justices asked pointed questions about her claims, and several seemed skeptical of arguments based purely on tradition and gender. Prince Edmund sat in the back of the courtroom, his face pale with stress. Over the past weeks, he had watched his mother's campaign tear apart relationships and create enemies throughout the noble class. Many of his own friends had distanced themselves from him, unwilling to be associated with what increasingly appeared to be a futile challenge to legitimate authority. When Chief Justice Hartwell called for a recess, Edmund approached his mother with obvious reluctance. "Mother, perhaps we should withdraw the challenge," he whispered urgently. "The court clearly favors Isabella, and continuing this fight will only make our situation worse." Margaret's eyes flashed with fierce determination. "Withdraw? After everything we have invested in this moment?" She grasped her son's arm tightly. "Edmund, you are meant to be a king. I will not let you surrender your destiny because of fear." But Edmund pulled away from her grip. "This was never my destiny, Mother. It was your ambition." His words carried the weight of years of suppressed resentment. "I never wanted to challenge Isabella. She will make a good queen." The confession hit Margaret like a physical blow. Her own son, the person she had sacrificed everything to elevate, was abandoning her cause. For a moment, her carefully constructed facade of confidence cracked, revealing the desperate woman beneath. When court resumed, the justices delivered their preliminary ruling with swift efficiency. Chief Justice Hartwell's voice carried clearly through the packed chamber as he declared, "After careful consideration of all evidence and arguments presented, this court finds no legal basis for challenging the succession of Princess Isabella to the throne of Valdoria." Gasps and murmurs erupted throughout the courtroom. Margaret felt the world spinning around her as the reality of defeat settled in. 3 decades of planning and scheming had come to this moment of complete failure. But the Chief Justice was not finished. "Furthermore," he continued sternly, "this court finds that Lady Margaret Ashworth's challenge was made without sufficient legal merit, and appears motivated by personal ambition rather than genuine constitutional concerns. The public rebuke was devastating. Margaret's face turned ashen as she realized the full implications of the ruling. Not only had she lost her legal challenge, but the court had essentially accused her of acting in bad faith. Princess Isabella rose from her seat in the royal gallery and approached the bench with regal dignity. When she spoke, her voice carried to every corner of the silent courtroom. "Your Honor, while I am grateful for the court's decision, I wish to address the divisions this challenge has revealed in our kingdom." The unexpected statement caught everyone by surprise, including Margaret. Isabella continued with remarkable composure. "Lady Margaret's concerns about my qualifications deserve serious consideration, not dismissal. I propose to address these concerns through action, rather than argument." The princess then turned to face Margaret directly. "I invite you to serve as an advisor to the crown, sharing your knowledge and experience for the benefit of Valdoria. Your years of service to this kingdom should not be forgotten because of this disagreement." The offer was unprecedented and generous, extending an olive branch to someone who had publicly challenged royal authority. Margaret stared at Isabella in shock, unable to process the unexpected mercy being offered. Prince Edmund stepped forward immediately. "Your Highness, I accept your gracious offer on behalf of our family. My mother's wisdom could indeed serve the kingdom well. In an advisory capacity." Margaret looked at her son, then at Princess Isabella, and finally at the expectant faces filling the courtroom. Years of anger and ambition warred with the recognition that continued resistance would only bring more shame upon her family. She began hesitantly, her voice barely audible. Then, for the first time in decades, Lady Margaret Ashworth bent her knee before Princess Isabella. "I accept your offer, Your Highness, and I pledge my loyalty to the rightful heir of Valdoria." The courtroom erupted in applause as citizens witnessed this dramatic resolution to the succession crisis. Captain Blackwood, watching from his position near the door, allowed himself a small smile of relief. The kingdom had avoided civil conflict through a combination of legal authority and royal mercy. Outside, the crowd quickly learned of the court's decision and Isabella's unexpected offer to Margaret. The news spread through the capital like wildfire, carried by messengers on horseback to every corner of Valdoria. By evening, celebrations had begun in the streets, as people rejoiced that their kingdom had survived its greatest internal challenge in generations. Back in the courthouse, King Frederick approached his daughter with evident pride. "Your handling of this situation shows wisdom beyond your years," he said quietly. "You will indeed make an excellent queen." Princess Isabella smiled, but her expression remained thoughtful. "The challenge taught me important lessons about leadership, Father. True authority comes not from forcing compliance, but from inspiring loyalty and respect." As the royal family prepared to leave the courthouse, Lady Margaret approached Princess Isabella one final time. Her face showed a mixture of humility and residual pride as she spoke. "Your Highness, I owe you an apology for my behavior these past weeks. Perhaps the kingdom is in better hands than I realized." Isabella inclined her head graciously. "Lady Margaret, your challenge made me stronger and more aware of my responsibilities. In many ways, you have already served the crown well, even if unintentionally." The two women, who had been bitter enemies just hours before, shared a moment of mutual understanding. Both had learned valuable lessons about power, ambition, and the true meaning of service to the kingdom. Captain Blackwood coordinated the royal family's departure from the courthouse, ensuring their safe passage through the celebrating crowds. As their carriage rolled through the capital's streets, citizens lined the roads to cheer their future queen. Isabella waved from the carriage window, her heart filled with determination to prove worthy of their trust. The succession crisis of Valdoria had ended not with violence or continued division, but with reconciliation and renewed unity. Princess Isabella had demonstrated that true royal authority lay not in the power to punish enemies, but in the wisdom to transform them into allies. As night fell over the kingdom, peace settled over Valdoria once again. The crown remained secure, the succession was established beyond doubt, and the realm had emerged stronger from its greatest challenge. In the years to come, Historians would mark this day as the moment when Princess Isabella proved herself ready to become not just a queen, but a great queen who could unite a kingdom through both strength and mercy.